This section is about deriving equations of circles. So here's the general form for a circle. You're going to do x minus h, where h is the x coordinate of the center, squared, plus the y minus k, k is the y coordinate of the center, squared, and then equal to the radius squared. So in our first example, they give you this graph, and they tell you that AB is the diameter, and they want you to write the equation. So the first thing you'll want to do is you will want to find where that center is. So if it's a horizontal or vertical line, you can just count it, right? If this is my diameter, I can find the radius by just doing half of it, and that's where my center will be. So if I go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, then I know my center is going to be at 4, which would be at this point right here. So for my center point, I can just find the coordinates 1, 2, 3, 4, and go down 1. So my center is at 4, -1. Now, if it ends up being a slanted line, you would have to use the midpoint formula instead, which is where you would have to add the x's and divide by 2, add the y's and divide by 2, and that's what they are showing here. But if it's an easy one where it's horizontal and vertical, just count it. The other part we have to do is find the length of the radius. And the radius is just going to be the length from the center to the edge. So we've already counted that, and that ends up being 4. So now we're ready to start plugging in our, plugging it back into our equation. So I have 4 for my center that I'm going to put in that h spot, and I have -1 that I'm going to put in that k spot. So I have x minus 4 quantity squared plus, now here where you have that minus and the negative, you are going to simplify and make that become a plus. So it'll be y plus 1 quantity squared. And then we found our radius is 4. So we put in 4, but you also need to remember to square that as well. So it will simplify to 16. All right, pause the video and try the check question. In the check question, you should have this graph here, and you can go ahead and find the center by the same way I showed you before, where you can just count it because it ends up being a vertical line. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. The length of my diameter is 8. So that means my radius is at 4. So if I count back at 4, that's where my center ends up being. So my coordinates of my center will end up being -3, +2. So if I put those in for the x and the y, remember that this will change into simplifying to a +3, and then this will stay as a -2. Then for your radius, you would count 1, 2, 3, 4. I would have to do 4 squared to find my equal to, so it'd be 16. All right, so on the next question, it's asking us to write an equation if it's giving us the center at -3, -5, but it passes through the point at 0, 0. Now is where we get to use the distance formula because we will need to know the length to find our radius. So reminding you that that distance formula was a way long time ago where we did the square root and we subtracted the x's squared plus subtracting the y squared. So I'm going to do 0 minus -3, subtracting my x's, square that, and then I'm going to add to that the difference of my y's. When I simplify, I can just type all of that into my calculator and I would get the square root of 34. Now, I would leave that as the square root for now. So I would just type in this portion under the square root. So that way, when you square it, that'll make it come a nice whole number. Okay, so otherwise you're going to be a little bit off on your equations. Now you're ready to write your equation. So you can plug in your center for the h and the k, which is what they're showing you at this step. And then our radius is the square root of 34. So now we're going to finish simplifying. This changes to x plus 3 squared. This will change to y plus 5 quantity squared. And then when you square that square root, that's what I was talking about. It changes it to a nice whole number. So if you end up getting that radius as a decimal, it may not change to a nice whole number because you have that rounding error in there. So try and leave it as a square root in its radical form. Okay, that concludes writing equations for a circle.